Hey guys, before we jump in, just a quick update. Tony will be back next week, and she's lined up a really interesting guest to come talk to us about art therapy and technology, how creative expression can help people process emotions, and how new tools are expanding access to therapeutic spaces while still keeping human creativity and connection at the center. But today, while Tony's out, we're bringing back one of our early episodes that feels especially relevant now. This episode is all about how the internet is changing language, from things like brain rot and algo-speak to the way algorithms shape the slang we use, and even how different generations understand the same word. Tony and I dive into insights from the entomology nerd and talk about how internet culture can fragment language, create identity signals, and sometimes lead to some pretty hilarious misunderstandings, especially when parents and kids are speaking what feels like two completely different dialects. It's really a conversation about language as a tool for connection rather than division, and how staying curious can help bridge those gaps. So if you missed this one first time around, here it is. Let's get into the episode.
Hello, welcome to Therapy, Tech, and Takeout, where humor meets healing with bite-sized chunks of wisdom and techie tips. I'm Tony Teixeira. I'm a therapist, entrepreneur, ethics nerd, and recovering overthinker.
And I'm Jackie Toll. I spent my career at the intersection of finance and tech. I'm an unapologetic spreadsheet addict and a low-rent stand-up comedian on the side. How you doing today, Tony? What you vibing on?
I'm good. What am I vibing? Oh my goodness, I got to see Megan 2 this weekend.
Was it scary?
Have you seen it?
No.
It's hilarious. It's
Really?
hilarious. More than scary. Yeah, it's like campy and fun. And is it scary? It's like not the way the first one was scary. It was just a lot of fun. It was hilarious, actually. I feel like it was more fun. It was funny more than scary. So it was a good old time. We had
fantastic.
fun watching that. Yeah. How about you? What are you vibing this week?
What am I vibing this week? Oh, you know what? I watched a documentary over the weekend about Lilith Fair, and I went with my friend, back in the 90s, and I didn't really have like a huge understanding of like the importance or the back. I thought it was like fun and great, and I loved it, but like it was interesting to see the more of the backstory and really like what it stood for, and it was just really cool. So I thought that was a fun, awesome documentary. And I also got to go see Steve Martin and Martin Short live, so that was pretty fun.
Wow. You should have gone with that one.
Right?
I love Lilith Fair. That's really I love Murders in the Building. Only Murders in the Building. Like, oh my gosh, that's like my favorite. My daughter, we had to ask her, we binged a lot of it. My husband and I binged it, and then we watched it with her because we introduced her to it. And then the new season dropped, and we're like, Sophie, do you want us to wait for you, or can we watch? She's like, no, you definitely have to wait for us. So now we have to wait to watch.
Watch
it till she's home. I know it is. She'll be home Thanksgiving, so hopefully we'll be able to watch it then. But I love Steve Martin Short, and Selena.
I know. They're so cute, all of them together. It's so sweet.
So cute together.
Yeah.
It was fun going back and then rewatching it, though, too.
Yeah.
Because I had just like a different feel. Like, I didn't love them yet, but then after watching it, you love them and you go back and you love them even more. So I love the characters. It's just great.
Yeah.
So what are we chatting about today?
So I love our article for this week. It's funny because when I sent it to you, I didn't realize it was a podcast. So I read like the transcript. So I was thinking in my mind. So I love the media that we have for this week. It's a Scientific American article featuring Adam Aleksic. He's the etymology nerd, and he talks about how internet culture is transforming language and how digital spaces are actually sort of like feeding a loop that is speeding up how slang spreads, and how words actually shift in meaning over time, and how also language is a way of expressing our identity and aligning, finding connection, and not just like sort of like grammatical rules. And so we're going to dive into all of that stuff, how technology is reshaping communication, if it's bringing us closer together, how we connect. But before we do, I'm so interested to know, Tony, do you have an interesting, a favorite or least favorite piece of internet slang?
Good question. I was in Target the other day and there was the clearance rack. And I was laughing my butt off because they had the toy, the Skibbity toilet toy, and I did a double take, that it was there. I don't know if I love it.
Right.
It's a term I think I love to hate because the first time I heard it, I was like, and they actually talk about it in this article. I'm like, what the hell is that?
Right.
What is that? And what's interesting to me about that is talking to that, because I always just talk to my kids about like culture and what's happening in the world and always take their view, find out like what their view is of things. And we have this like the clash of the generations, and that moment is always fun. So when I think of that, I laugh to myself because I thought of that moment. I'm like, what does that mean? I love asking my kids like, what does that mean? And watch their faces like, oh, there's that old lady again. And do you have a favorite or one that you love to hate?
My favorite thing is like finding them out and then like using them around my kids because it annoys them. Or like asking them what are the fun ones to use and seeing the horror, like that they're like, oh, I don't want to tell you what people are using.
Yeah.
But
the horror in their faces when you use it, even appropriately. And they're like, oh, I can't believe my mom's using that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got that.
Totally get that.
I got that a few times, especially with my oldest daughter. Like the boo-boos they bring up in the article, how it's like that time was here and then left faster than we can realize. But I definitely think that it's interesting to think of how not only are we shaped by it, but we're forming it as well. As we've talked about it in our algorithms, like we're getting these curated slices and what I see you may not see. I think it's hard if I thought like if I had young kids now when they talked about some of the words, like bop and stuff, like you wouldn't necessarily think that that's even something you need to worry about. Like, what does that mean? Right. Like it feels like it already has a meaning to it.
Well, it's like it feels a little counterculture-ish in that it's a word that has meaning that people can use that have an alternate meaning that other people don't know about.
Yeah.
So it makes it kind of cool, and it's also not new. I mean, this is not new that a group of young people would have their own language that creates community. What's new about it is the connection to the algorithms, and Adam has the book, Algo-speak, How Social Media is Transforming the Future of Language. We've had language change and develop over time, and I think like every year the dictionary like brings in some of that language. I was just listening to a podcast not that long ago about that, like the list of the new words that were part of. I wonder if Skibbity toilet was actually one of them. Gonna have to look that up. I forget, I think it was. Like Skibbity toilet is like kind of in the dictionary now. They've embraced that and taken that in, and it means a nonsense word, right? So now that it's mainstream, like, do people care? No, they probably don't. There's probably as much to be said as this is different and new, and we have kind of like a secret little language around it, again, which isn't new, but the new part is that using and writing about and creating memes about it create an algorithm that brings people into a different space where they can meet each other and talk about it. Like Adam talks about the subreddits and the places and the memes that are kind of created around this. By the time it ends up in the mainstream, then it's like kind of old news and nobody really cares.
Absolutely. I wonder, do you think while this isn't new, it does seem like it's more fragmented, perhaps, or specialized maybe than before? And I think one of the things that they talk about towards the end of the piece that we'll link to is how like we're all kind of feeling our way through the dark in this social media landscape, like trying to figure out like how much, like what's the right amount, and how do we curate our feeds so that we're seeing a diverse set of things and coming across like different aspects of culture so that we can have an appreciation and an understanding for them. And I thought it was interesting too that he got into a lot about the meaning of the words and like the background and the history of where these words come from, and how like while you might think it means this one thing, kind of like you were talking about before, it's either intentionally cloaked with a different meaning than what I'm like outwardly sharing, and or it's also perhaps influenced by things and derived from things that perhaps like I as the speaker don't have any knowledge of, and I'm not bringing to the table to the conversation, and it may or may not be off-putting or offensive to people or other things. And so how do you think about navigating that challenge?
About the challenge of language that not everybody understands.
Yeah, like, you know, like somebody could be talking to you and you could think that you're following them, and then it's like, oh, I really was like being, you know, ironic.
I can tell you it's awkward from personal experience, and I'll share my like personal experience with you. I used to teach college, like college level psychology at a community college near me, and we were talking about relationships and sex and sexuality and all that, and I thought I was going to be cool. I was actually talking about dating, and I used the words hooking up, and they all kind of stopped and looked at me and like kind of laughed. Unbeknownst to me, I was talking about sex when I wasn't really planning on talking about sex. I thought like hooking up meant like, you know, two people getting together, like hooking up, like, you know, not hooking up. So I felt the silence, you know, kind of come over the room. And I looked around, I'm like, it doesn't mean what I think it means. Do I have that right? They're like, yeah. And they started laughing. I'm like, does it mean sex? And they're like, yes, it means sex. And we all had a really good laugh about it. So I think what it comes down to is if we don't take ourselves too seriously around language, then I think we could be okay with that. I think that if we get locked and loaded into this is what the dictionary says, and these words are okay, and these are like approved words, as if language is a static thing, then I think we're going to have a lot of miscommunication and culture clash and clash of the generations versus thinking of language as being flexible, enduring and ephemeral in some ways, and changeable, and in some ways makes us vulnerable. And if we're okay with that, then getting corrected or understanding that there's a different way to look at things. If we come from the place of like language is about community, and you can actually create communities depending on how you know, what words you use.
I love that he said that community and communication come from the same root, right?
They do. Yeah. And that it can be inclusive. I mean, the problem, though, could be that language can be used against people, and then it's othering, and that's not good. That's just creating more, you know, disconnection. So I think we have to almost have a sense of humor about language, and that it's okay to play with language and not have to worry about, you know, getting or that there like exists, you know, like a there are handbooks about like, hey, grammar, and this is the way it's supposed to be. But hasn't that changed over time? You know, haven't these things kind of changed?
For sure.
That's kind of my take on like navigating that space. If we think about it as community, we have a little bit of a sense of humor. We look at, you know, the fact that dictionaries, you know, Webster Dictionary can make decisions about what words do we want to include. Remember back in the day, I'd look up words on like the Urban Dictionary. That was the thing, right? UrbanDictionary.com or something like that. I don't know if it probably still exists, because I'd hear words. I'd be like curious. Ooh, what's that about? This is the first time I'm hearing it. Let me look that up and see what that means. Yeah, I think if we're playful about it, we don't have to worry so much about navigating it.
I think that that's such an awesome approach. And I'm interested to know how you think about words that you don't want to say.
Example. What words don't you want to say, Jackie?
Well, words that like, you know, like you make a personal conscious decision that like, this isn't a word that I feel like is appropriate for me to use in conversation, right? Like, I think, you know, there's a lot of argument about like being able to say a word or not being able to say a word or this or that. But at the end of the day,
who owns the word? Like who owns the word?
Yeah. But I think at the end of the day, you know, it is like an individual decision that we all make about what words we say. There's nobody physically stopping us from saying any words, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, you break up a really great topic about like who co-opts that word and who, you know, and who embraces that word. I think of like, I worked in the field of sexual assault for many years. So the word slut has the connotation of being negative. And then there are groups of women that have taken that back. And we used to do slut walks. They would call it slut walk and, you know, get women together and like say, we're taking back that word and we're going to find a positive spin on it and own it. And this is what it means to us. So that's kind of what you're meaning
Yeah,
about like
yeah.
words that people won't say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how people approach the sort of like the ethics of, the words they choose to use or not, or what hills they want to die on around language. I always go back to like Dolly Parton, who's like the lovely Dolly, who's like, I when she finds something that she says that has offended somebody or named something, she's like, I just change it. Like, why would I want to like have something out there that's like offensive to people that hurt, is like a hurtful like sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how I think about it.
We can apologize.
Yeah.
We have the ability. We're human and we make mistakes. I apologize a lot.
Me too.
Probably not as often as my husband would. Probably wants me to apologize a little bit more. Hi, honey. I'm sure you're watching. Especially with my clients, because I'm like really careful around my language, and I appreciate when somebody calls me out on that, or when I didn't know that what I said, the intention was that. I don't have to, and I don't explain, oh, I didn't know. I just say I'm sorry, because what that meant for you, that's really the reparative work is more important.
Yeah. I think that makes so much sense.
In some ways, that brings up the thought in my mind of like, well, then in the navigation of language, all the the list of things that I gave you before, we can also be brave and be willing to be wrong at the same time when it comes to using language, and just when we get it wrong, say, yeah, I got it wrong.
Yeah, I like that, and I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I think that's.
What did you think about the conversation about brain rot in this article? Because I thought it was
interesting. I think it reminded me kind of a conversation we had back a while ago around AI slop kind of, but it's like the production of content, making it more meaning-less, making all content more meaningless on some level.
Mm-hmm.
I think like a lot of things in the article, there's a lot of like like a lot of multifaceted positions, or like things that are in conflict and finding a balance between, right? And I think that brain rot's kind of part of that too. It's like on some level we need some of it, right? Like we need, be it doom scrolling or like sitting in front of the TV and watching something that like just takes your mind away, or meditating, probably the healthier choice. But like we need some of these things to just like clear out our brains from time to time, right? We can't always be on.
Yeah, well, but I really thought they brought up a good point that got me thinking, when they were talking about art, high art versus low art, which is judgmental, right? There's a judgment there. So what? High art is people who were, trained as artists, and what's low art, just like kind of anybody who does it. There's feels like there's a judgment there, which feels icky because art shouldn't be judged.
Right.
Art is art. It is, how you appreciate it, and almost anything can be appreciated. I have like stuff on my desk that my kids made me. I have this thing that like I adore this. This was actually part of a set that was like a tic-tac-toe set that everything else broke except this. And this has a lot of meaning for me. It was made by a child, by one of my children. So like somebody who's creating a meme is, and that stuff that goes viral, like if you think about it, it's like kind of art. It's kind of like, opening up the doors of a museum and saying like, come in and look at this art, and it gets passed around and around. So I kind of like flipped a lot of my thinking as I was reading this article when they brought up, pop culture and, pop art like Andy Warhol and some of the things that people dismissed as being art. Beauty is everywhere. Beauty is around us, even in the things that people might not objectively think are beautiful. So yeah, I think that the stuff that, like the memes and stuff, like scrolling may give you brain rot if you're not interacting with it, but maybe some of the stuff that we're viewing, there are other ways to look at it and other ways to appreciate it, which might be the antidote to brain rot. If we looked at that stuff in an artful and thoughtful way, then we're interacting rather than just doom scrolling with the stuff.
Yeah, I think that's
just kind of my thoughts.
I like that. And I think that the part of it being that interactive piece, right? Like bringing the humanity to, to the process. And I think that's what sets us apart from the technology, right? That doesn't have all of the ability to read all of the other cues that go into communication, right? Like it's just picking up the text and converting that to numbers, you know what I mean? And then regenerating back what it thinks you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's gives us the ability to like continue to kind of like, have that like connection and interaction with each other and with the tech, right? Like it's kind of all together at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. The other thing that really struck me as being so different than how language has changed over time, like this connection to algorithms and technology, was that words are changing so that people can use them to circumvent censorship, right?
Right?
Like that is totally cool. I think that people have done that before, but the fact that we can do that in the space of social media and like get more messages out there to millions of more people rather than like maybe writing a flyer that you hand out to people on campus and you only have that small community. Now communities get bigger. Now it affects more people. And I'm all for freedom of speech. I love that idea. And it really got me to thinking about how language defines a generation and that this generation is not only going to be defined by whatever words they come up with, but the creation of a community on based on algorithms, based on what they're going to see, what they're going to
Right.
see more of. They're really going to be shaped by so many more people, so many more thoughts and ideas. So yeah, it's a
Hopefully.
lot of input. Hopefully in positive ways, but if we censor language, banning books, censoring language, we're dismissing voices. It's like the same thing of like, art, saying that this is good art, this is bad art. These are good words, these are bad words, or these ideas are good, or these ideas. We need all the
Sure. But like how I think of it though is like, is that piece of the algorithm adding to the diversity of perspectives you see, or is it taking away from the diversity of perspectives you see, or shaping it and how it wants you to see things, right? Like I think it's really interesting when you look at, your feed versus somebody else's feed on anything, any of the social platforms or news platforms or things like that. I mean, it's vastly different.
Well, the first thing that brings up when you say that is that we already have the generational divide based on the algorithms, not only your uniqueness, but like my kids' feeds look different than my feed because we're different generations and we're going to get fed different things. So like there's terms that come up that I'm not even aware of. I read this article. I'm like, what the hell is that? I didn't know. I found out what a labubu is like when it was already over. Everybody was over labubus. So you're right about that. And I think that is a way that the algorithms could divide us because
I think that's why it's like so important to, engage with like actual humans, making sure that, we're connecting with people and they're not, only bots or only AI generated content. And then also making sure that we're like, intentionally exposing ourselves to things that are outside of like our feeds. And I think it's important to talk to our kids about why that's important too. I know we had media literacy sort of education when I was in school. I don't know that there's like, I don't know how much of that our kids get from like the schools today versus having those conversations, but I think they're super important to have with them as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and as we're winding down this conversation, I think like you did a really good job summarizing what does this information mean? What is the connection between the algorithms and language and how that gets shaped? What kind of meaning does it have in our lives as parents and as humans? It's in understanding that language can connect us or divide us. And if we want to be connected, then we really have to talk about this and we have to have conversations with other humans and most importantly with our kids, like really knowing what it is they see or hear or know about, because we don't know. It's BS if, I always think any parent says, I know what my kids are looking at. I know. You don't, no way. There's no way but if but having open conversations, even saying, I don't know, can you tell me more about that, could be really important, because I think language can connect us or it can divide us very easily. So, any last words? Do you have any last
any
thoughts
last
on
language to share? No, this was really fun. I find this so interesting because I felt like language and grammar and all that stuff was so unapproachable for me when I was a kid. Those were just not the areas I excelled in, and it did feel like something that would be like used against me, like when I used the word incorrectly, or like all the red things on my papers that I would hand. And so but it's fun to find people like Adam who are so into and passionate about the topic and can really energize you and help you realize language is supposed to bring us together. Like that's what communications function is. And so don't let it divide you from other people. I think it's such a strong and powerful message that I would want to leave this conversation and share with everybody, because I think that that's really the core of what I hear through these things and resonates with me for sure.
Yeah, me too. And like my takeaway is like to be really non-judgmental about that, and about language, and about the language that other people are using, and to be curious about that. Yeah, you use that. Well, what does that mean? Not be afraid to say, oh, I didn't get that, or I don't know that vocabulary word. What does that word mean? So curiosity and community. I love all these C words. It's been great talking to you. I'd love to hear what our listeners think about language and how the algorithms are shaping their speech, shaping their communities, because now we're going beyond language. It's like the who we are maybe also gets shaped, and our communities get shaped there. So love to have more conversations about this with our listeners.
Absolutely. Well, take care. We'll talk to you guys next week. Bye.